Also start the transcription. There we go.
Great. Thank you very much, Alec. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you all today. My heavens, 39 of these meetings today that we've had since the beginning of the pandemic. And what's interesting, we sort of necessity drove this with lockdowns and the challenges we faced way back over a year and a half ago. And now these meetings have been able to morph out a bit so that we can bring other pieces of information to you as we gather. I mean, we'll have the usual information today that we normally have related to the pandemic and the SUS program, but also very pleased to welcome today Canon Michael Reed, and I think Audrey DeLisney is also on the call, who are the co-chairs of our Synod planning team, to give you a little bit of information about our upcoming Synod. And that takes place starting next Thursday. We're a week out, so we'll start next Thursday. Running. Alec might get to mute everybody on the call.
I'm going to mute everybody, Michael, and I will get you to come off. You can. Yep, just one second. Mute all. There. Everyone is now muted.
Great. And I'm off. Yeah, and just so we're very pleased to welcome today, give you some information about our upcoming Synod, which is just a week away, and ask you to please uphold all the delegates and clergy from the parishes who will be gathering in a combination of online and in-person hubs around the diocese starting next Thursday. So just without further ado there, I want to begin us with an opening prayer today, and then we'll carry on with our day. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you praise and thanksgiving for the gift of this beautiful day and everything that is a part of it. We give you thanks for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, and the power of the Spirit that draws us together, the unity of his body, the church, and the world, for the mission and ministry entrusted to us, and for the strengthening power of that Spirit that calls us ever forward into the future that you have laid out for us. We ask you to give us clear vision, wisdom, and insight in our conversations today, and we give thanks for those committed to our care throughout the parishes of the Diocese of Ontario. We give thanks for the leaders who have gathered here today, placing themselves at the service of the mission of Christ in their places, and for the work that they do. Strengthen us now through this day and always. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Just to carry on, I think not much by way of updates, other than to say that as we continue through this pandemic, one of the things, and again, I think for the 39th time on our 39 calls, thank you so much for the work that you have been doing over this time in support of the policies that have been laid out. We have walked out into uncertain and unknown ground over these months and over the past year and a half. And we continue through as we see the numbers across Eastern Ontario are looking very good related to COVID-19 across the province. We see the numbers coming down, and we try to continue to exercise caution in the decisions that we take and the policies that we put together. We'll have an opportunity for some conversation around that. But we do see, and we've had some sort of startling examples across the country and in other parts of the world when decisions are taken and things go a little too quickly, how easily this virus can not only mutate but also get itself reestablished. And so we continue to carry on in hope that for the future ahead of us. And in that regard, also very much looking forward to the work that's coming up. And especially the having Bishop Bill Cliff from the Diocese of Brandon, my friend and colleague, who will be here with us. And if you have opportunity, and of course those first 2 days really are Synod, but there's not a business part of Synod on those first 2 days, but there's an opportunity for anybody to be able to come and to share in that either online and to hear what Bishop Bill has to say. I've had opportunity, and maybe you've had opportunity to sit under his teaching and preaching, and Bill is a very engaging speaker, and you'll certainly be edified by having an opportunity to hear what he has to say around that whole theme for our synod being building hope, being light, building hope, walking together. And so we're excited about the work there to hear a little bit more about that. So with just that little brief introduction from me, I want to turn it over to Alec, and we will carry on with the agenda for this afternoon. So over to you, Alec.
Thank you, Bishop. So as we work our way through now, generally we've been through a fair bit of this before, but a few updates and just a few reminders and a little bit of FAQ. So we remain in the province of Ontario. As you recall, months ago, they set out with a 3-step plan called Reopening Ontario. And we are in and have been for some months in step 3. And that's been driven predominantly by vaccination rates as their key metric, but also by other improvements in the underlying metrics of public health, things like new cases and ICU rates and those types of things. The province has not yet given us anything new, but when one looks at the regulations, they are now building what they're now calling step 4. So who could imagine we will go into step 4 of a 3-step plan? And so what that seems to signal is that not going to be opening up in the sense of going to what we might have conceived of as the green stage when we started out with our plans, that the province will keep restrictions in place, and we will move to another layer of it. So we expect there will be some easing of it. They've already, for example, allowed, if one watches some sporting events, you'll see that capacity at some of the arenas has been increased, theaters and those types of things. We expect, we don't know if they're going to make any kind of adjustment for churches. Our anticipation is that it will remain driven by distancing, not by seating, but certainly masks and all the other bits of our protocols we expect will remain in place. And we also expect that they will be very much focused on vaccination as a key element of the plan. So again, as we've worked this through, we continue to have better clarity on the transmission. And I think as we talked the last month, what is very clear is that aerosol is the primary method of transmission. That surfaces, or fomites as they call them, much lower risk, but droplets in the air, which can be spread farther and increased in density by talking, forceful exhalation and singing, are important factors. That the length and the amount of exposure that one has, which is why therefore capacity constraints are important, and ventilation. And so someone asked, well, how can they allow in the Scotiabank Centre, how can they allow 20,000 people? Whereas in our church, and while our churches can be drafty places when you go to try and heat them, in general, when buildings are built, public venues like that now, the engineering of ventilation is done in a whole, obviously very modern way, measured and engineered out. And so they are aware of how fast the air changes, where the air patterns flow in that, versus older buildings like our churches, it's much more hit and miss. In fact, I can pretty much be sure that none of our buildings were designed for ventilation. We know that the variants continue, that Alpha was 50% more infectious than the original, and that Delta is 60% more infectious yet. There is another one out called Mu, I believe, that is more infectious yet. And so what we know is, I think the Bishop alluded to earlier, that variants will continue. So we need to continue to be vigilant against those. Those who aren't vaccinated are a risk not only to themselves, but to everyone else. But a key factor is that our protocols are there to protect if someone is present, whether it's in any setting, if someone is present, vaccinated or not, that those protocols are in place. You've seen this before. I'm not going to dwell on it. The charts will again be on the website, but what it just highlights again is the impact based upon ventilation, indoor, outdoor, the impact of low occupancy, high occupancy, how many people there are, and the impact of whether you're wearing a mask, whether you're wearing for a short time or a long time. And as you see, as the factors shift, and in general, our churches will fit into that second right-hand sector, wearing of face coverings, contact for prolonged time, because most of our services are an hour or more. So that's second box on the right is really where we hang out. I know winter is coming and ventilation becomes much more difficult, but we need to start considering, as the temperatures drop, how we handle ventilation. Because again, having doors open, having windows open, but is one thing, but having fresh air flow in and out of the building. And so we're going to do a little more work next month to try and talk to some of that and look at some of the alternatives. But what we know is this is a key factor in terms of, again, protecting the people that are in the building. And just for a moment to look at, our population and to look at where Ontario has been. So this is actually as of last week. But what you can see here is that the confirmed cases in this calendar year, there's been 44,000 of them in the province of Ontario. And you can see how they, since September, have gone. But one of the pieces here is that's interesting on this chart is that how many people are secondarily infected for every person that typically catches COVID. So if there is a person that has COVID, how many people do they affect? And right now, it's just under one other person. And so what you've seen is that the work, even in the last couple of months, has been tremendous to try and reduce the infection rates and to reduce what they refer to as breakouts. So someone in a retail setting, someone in a school setting, in any of those kinds of cases. This is now saying when a person catches it, they typically are only infecting one other person. But again, when you put this in the context of our churches and our communities, why we stay focused, why we stay with some of the pieces that are sometimes a little more strict than other cases. This looks at cases that have been cumulative in the province by age group. And what you can see is that certainly the biggest numbers in the province have been in the 20 to 39 group, but not too far behind that, 40 to 59, and then 60 to 79 is a large group, and then over 80. So what you see is significant populations that are confirmed cases by group. But more importantly, or more tragically, this just talks to the deaths. And so for the cumulative deaths up to the end of last week, there's been 9,800 people, about 1.6 of those that are infected with COVID that pass away. But if you look at the numbers, and you look at over age 60, which is a typical demographic for our churches, 9,000 of that 9,800 are in the 60 and up category in terms of numbers of deaths. And so as you can see, that's a huge proportion. So the other age groups, 0.1% of deaths for those that are that catch it that are 19 and under, 0.1 for 20 to 39, 0.4, 40 to 59. The rates then start to climb. But that represents for us an extreme caution factor, because when one manages risk, one looks at the probability of something happening and the impact of something happening. And this says that this is a classic high impact situation. Just a quick snapshot again across our 3 health units in this diocese. For the last little while, most of our health units have been reporting, kind of single digit per day new cases. You can see the numbers in terms of cumulative case counts. Leeds Grenville has the highest number, Kingston Frontenac not far behind, and then Hastings Prince Edward, and then expressed as a rate of population, so for 100,000 people. So again, you can see that the numbers are reasonably consistent across the province, across our diocese. So that our guidelines remain in effect. We are still in step 3 for the province. Rates of vaccination are high, but they're really working now to get them higher, because of course now you're into the groups that are resistant, and you're really past the phase of people not being able to get there or just not quite getting there. You're really now down to people that are making an absolute choice. We also know from the news that Pfizer has applied both in Canada and the US for certification of their vaccine for the 5 to 11-year-old groups. In the US, there's expectations that of a very rapid deployment to school-age kids. It's not unreasonable to expect that Canada and Ontario will follow, and there will be mandating of vaccination for school-age kids as well in the near future. And I did speak earlier to the variants. We continue to work with expertise. We continue to talk to other dioceses with their experience and how they are moving. And again, some dioceses have moved forward with certain initiatives and are now looking at backing up. So for example, the Diocese of Ottawa is considering requiring vaccination proof to go from a service of worship to a coffee hour. They had made the step, as we did, that didn't require that, but they're now considering backing up on that. And that's based upon guidance and experience. Again, a key point to note is that the protocols establish minimums for our churches. And particularly the one that's come up for clarity is around proof of vaccination. Consistent with provincial regulations, we do not require at the diocesan level churches to have proof of vaccination for people to join in worship in person. That is, however, a choice that the wardens, an incumbent or priest in charge, can make, and they must of course advise the bishop. But you do have the ability, if you believe for local reasons and your congregation feels that's the appropriate approach, you do have that choice. At this point, we are aware of 2 churches in the diocese that have made that choice. We will, when the new guidelines come out, when the province steps out of stage 4, we will of course review the guidelines, review the regulations at the provincial level, discuss it across the province, and then put some new guidelines out in this diocese. But there's going to be a continued focus on aerosol and how we deal with that in the winter period. Couple of things that come up frequently. Capacity. So there are 2 different parts. The one is determining what the capacity of your space is. And that is measured by how many people can be seated individually with 2 meters of separation. And so that is to do the calculation that says, how many people are the maximum in this room? That does not say that once the maximum's established, that people cannot be seated, as the province's regulations say, people that are habitually cohabitating, living in the same house, that they can't be seated together. So you can seat people together, but you cannot exceed the maximums. You can't decide there's 30 places. If I have 20 couples, I can have 40 people plus 10 other singles, that's 50 people. The capacity, regardless of how you're configured, is the calculated one per person per every 2 meters. Concert and events remain with the same limitation. And again, there comes requests that say, well, why can't we apply concert hall or movie theater? Well, again, it is a matter of caution. It is a matter of consistency. And of course, how do we rationalize that on Saturday night at a concert, your capacity could be 150, but on Sunday morning, it's only 30. And that just somehow in the same building, in the same seating. So that just does not make sense. So we remain, non-worship events require the same capacity limitations. Non-worship events by provincial law require proof of vaccination. Had a number of questions with the coming of Advent and Christmas seasons, bazaars, bake sales, and those types of things that are both fundraising and social activities. Again, the preference, as you recall from our chart earlier on risk factors, is to do those outdoors. Not always possible, can be very seasonal. But if you are doing them inside, but you again need to adhere to capacity limitations, you are then subject to retail, the same guidelines as retail. So then vaccination proof, distancing, masking, contact tracing, all those things would be required. Questions recently about, well, what about the home bake stuff? What about if we make, so the province actually has issued, back in January, issued a guideline regulation around home-based food businesses. And by putting the food out and actually selling it at a bake sale or bazaar, you're actually selling homemade product. As always, the church is legally responsible, no different than 5 years ago. If you sell something at a bake sale and someone is food poisoned, not only is the person that made it technically liable, so is the church. But it does, the guidelines do provide things for how you make sure of sanitation, proper food handling, etc., for home-based baking. They also categorize what are low-risk foods for such things. So for those that are asking and looking at those things, I've given you the link for that. And that is, of course, the province of Ontario. Not going to read through this other than you know, our regulations and procedures, policies remain in place. When the province moves to step 4, we of course will take a little bit of time to digest that, to look at the detailed regulations, to consult with health units, with the epidemiologists, and talk to other dioceses, and review that. So there is some expectation that in the coming days, either later this week or early next week, the province will make some announcements. And so right now there's no commitment around that, and we know that these things can be a little bit, you know, last minute. They always signal ahead of time that there's change coming, and then seems to drive things at their own pace. Again, we did speak earlier about the vaccination policy. We still, our firm position is we encourage everyone to be vaccinated for the well-being of all. Quick update on SUS. So for August, we did, as I indicated in the August meeting, we did not anticipate, and at the end we did not. We actually saw an increase in our churches in income across the diocese. So it actually went up. We used 2019 as our baseline for comparative. It went from 344,000 to 371. So we actually saw a $25,000 increase. That means we did not qualify in the month of August. Of note, there's just under $1.7 million in bank accounts around the diocese and the churches. And that's up from when the pandemic started, and pretty much hangs around that number. So just another broad indicator. The other thing I've added on here is based upon what was reported. These were the totals for the month, or the average Sunday attendance. And as you can see, average Sunday across our churches was just under 1,700. Just under half of those were in person. About a third of them watched it in a recorded mode, so off of YouTube or a similar platform. And then about just under 20% of them participated live. So via a live meeting platform like Zoom or GoToMeeting or Teams, or live on Facebook, something like that. We're still chasing our last two churches for the month of September, but I can give you the update on what the numbers look like. We are currently down about $110,000 across all churches, comparing September of 2021 to September of 2019. And that's about a 22% decrease. So at this point, given that neither of the churches we are missing are major ones, we anticipate that we will qualify this month, and there will be a subsidy provided out. And if we don't get those two churches in by close of business tomorrow, we're just going to submit without them. The average Sunday attendance, as you can see, was up from the month of August. It was 1,652 in August, up to 2,285. The bulk of that increase, big chunk from that, of course, coming from in-person. So in-person is about 46%, online recorded just under 40%, and the other 15% online live. And so what you saw, which as you would expect from September, from August, that you are seeing some increase. Looking forward, the federal government has announced in August that they will extend CEWS to period 2021 or period 21, which will be basically the month of October for us. So they have extended that program out, and of course continued to reduce the rates and increase the thresholds. So for this period, it'll be the same for period 21, which will be October. It'll be the same rates. I've boxed that in, and then I've highlighted, in general, we will sit in those bottom two categories. So if we are your revenue rate less 10%, times 0.25 is where we would anticipate, or if we don't see a 10% reduction, of course, it's 0. So that's where we will be. So the forms will go up to the website at the end of the month, and for reporting your October numbers. At this point, there were no specific commitments made in the federal budget or federal campaigns, but on the other hand, given the dynamics in Ottawa, it's not entirely impossible that they may extend it again. But at this point, there has been no policy statement made which would indicate so. So we will continue to monitor that. But again, what this means is for churches is in the month of end of October up to November 15th to get those forms into us. And with that, what I would like to now do is turn over to Canon Michael Reid and Audrey Delisney, who are our co-chairs of our upcoming Synod 2021, and have them give us an update. And you probably have to come off mute because I did mute everybody.
Thanks, Alex. The first thing we want to do today is want to just play a short video. We're very excited that our keynote speaker for Synod is the Bishop William Cliff. And as the Bishop pointed out, numbers of us had the opportunity to listen to Bishop William in teaching and speaking. And those of us who were at the next to previous provincial synod. He was the keynote speaker there too at provincial synod, and it was just remarkable. And one of the reasons why we asked him if he would consider coming to join us for our synod this year. So I want to just play, Alex is going to make this happen magically somehow, because I don't know how to do it. But a short video from Bishop William talking about coming to join us.
And let me just pop him back up here. I'm in the wrong. All of a sudden I lost him. Sorry, here he is. I have the wrong bishop up. My apologies. There he is. Back up to full screen. And right, I meant to start that. This is why we wanted to test this today, to make sure that that the process was clean. So, and I just have to toggle that, include computers. And I'm just going to find the right. I thought this was going to be easy.
We did it. We did it a few minutes ago. It worked perfect.
It did.
Yeah.
All right. Can you now see my screen?
Yes.
Hello, I'm William Cliff. I'm the Bishop of the Diocese of Brandon.
We don't see the bishop right now. Just hear his voice, Alex.
There's the theme, being light.
Oops, that's because it paused the video. All right, let me try that again.
Well, maybe while Alex is working on that technology, I'll just start.
Oh, you're not seeing him? Sorry.
No.
Okay. One more try. Let me just see why that should have. Oh, I see.
Is it because you got Michael spotlighted? Does that cause a problem?
Could. I'm about to
turn his computer on.
I was to say what I was about to try was unspotlighting. I know that's hurtful, but
I'm crushed.
Okay.
Oh, we're getting closer. We got it.
Hello, I'm William Cliff. I'm the Bishop of the Diocese of Brandon. I'm the speaker at your upcoming synod, which bears the theme, being light and building hope. I wanted to take this time to encourage you to pray for the upcoming synod and for all the delegates who will attend, either in person or through a satellite meeting. We'll be breaking open the scriptures and looking to be taught by God what's next for the Diocese of Ontario and where is the church called to be after the pandemic. I want to speak to you of the profound hope that is found deep inside the question of what's next. Synods aren't normally noted for their excitement, but I hope to teach, to challenge, to entertain, and for us to laugh together. We'll see you in October.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So we'll look forward to having Bishop William with us, and he's, as I say, he's just an absolute delight. I would say his comment about synods are really exciting. I would say that there's been far more excitement trying to get this synod off the ground and ready than any other synod I've been a part of, certainly. But Bishop William will definitely bring some excitement to it with his depth of knowledge and his as he says, breaking open of the scriptures and sharing his faith, which he does in such a wonderful way. Many of you will have known him from the three cantors who used to trip around right across Canada and raising money for the Primates World Relief and Development Fund. And he was one of the cantors when they were still performing together. So it'll be great to have Bishop William with us. Just a few updates. First and foremost, I'd like to start by saying thank you. And there's a number of thank yous to express today. First of all, thank you to the number of volunteers and people that are helping us to make Synod work this year and to make it a great experience for all of us, whether we happen to be online or whether we happen to be in a hub or a bit of both. A special shout out to the hubs for clergy and hosts in the hubs for their welcome of our Synod delegates that will be attending there and their hosting of that. There has been numbers of meetings with our hosts and our tech people in those locations, and we're very grateful for offering of themselves and their gifts and their hospitality. So thank you to each of the local hubs for doing that on our behalf. And to thank those who have taken the time, and our registrations are flowing in, and we have most of our delegates now registered for Synod. That's a significant part for us as we plan for how people are going to attend and engage with Synod. And we've got most of that information in, and we're very grateful for those who took the time to register online and let us know what you are planning and doing. It's a good time also to advertise that, of course, Friday is a day that we're inviting a broader participation by members across the diocese to join us for Bishop Williams' presentations, the ministry showcase, and or expo, and of course to hear our own bishop's charge on Friday as well. Non-members that would like to join us for Friday also need to register, and that information is on the diocesan webpage with a link to facilitate that registration by those who would like to join us for that. There's a lot of material now available on the diocesan website, including the convening circular. We do invite people to take time to go through the circular and familiarize themselves with the work that has been done over the last 2.5 years or so. But there's also other information about the Ministry Expo, the services, worship materials, and the agenda for Synod itself. And that's all available on the website now. And I encourage you, and for those who are able to do it, if you're joining us online, to download and print the material. It'll make it easier for you to participate, particularly in worship, if you're able to do that, or to ask your local clergy to do that for you. For those attending in the hubs, the worship material will be printed and available to you at the hubs. So we'll invite you to pick that material up as you join us in person for those events. We have about 90% of our registrations in, and interestingly enough, the attendance is about 50-50 between in-person engagement and online engagement. And so we seem to have hit that about the same mark that we did for the pre-Synod meetings. And so all things are coming together and the preparations are falling into place. And we certainly look forward to welcoming you to Synod in whatever way you choose to join. For those of you who are delegates or come as non-members to join us. And as the co-chair of the planning committee, I am really looking forward to Halloween this year. That's my update, Alex.
Great, thank you, Michael. Audrey, you have anything you want to add?
Not really, Alex. Just a reminder, if you are a delegate, you need to bring your lunch and your snacks, and you need to bring your ID to get in, and that's the provincial rule. If you're going into a meeting, we need your ID every day. But no, I think Michael covered it very well. Thanks.
Great. So one other quick piece. Our next meeting, as we've discussed, we are going setting the pattern now to continue these meetings on the third Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. And we will continue that with the same connection link in Teams. So the next meeting would be scheduled for the 18th of November. And of course, that notice will go out ahead of that. And with that, we have, well, we actually have the bishop, we have Wayne, we have Michael and Audrey. So we are all available for questions. As always, you can ask questions using the put your hand up button. Is an easy way to grab attention. If you go into the chat bubble, you can, of course, ask questions. I think most of you have heard, but Laura Conway is now off on maternity leave. And Laura gave birth a few weeks ago to a bouncing baby boy. So congratulations to Laura and Stu. And so stepping into Laura's large shoes is Molly Stewart. And so Molly has joined the office here as the executive assistant and office admin. And so Molly is going to be her first experience today moderating the call. So you can ask, come off mute, ask your question, or you can go in chat and Molly will pick those up for you. I would ask that once you've asked your question, you go back onto mute just to keep the background noise down. So I see Ken Tuckwood, have you got your hand up? Okay, maybe not. Let's go, Molly. Do you have any questions in the chat?
Not yet, not at the moment. We do have Andy Chisholm and Julie Jackson with their hands up, though.
Okay.
Oh, and just now, Dale Redding has asked, please explain proper usage of fans for ventilation, i.e. ceiling fans and portable fans.
Sure. And we'll get into this in a little more detail next month. But one of the fundamentals is you want to move air, you want to move, quote, stale air out of the building, and you want to move fresh air into the building, because stale air by definition may have some aerosols in it. And you want the airflow to be away from people. So what you don't want is, taking air that may have aerosol virus in it and have that blowing straight at someone. So generally the guidance is to place fans in the exit point. So in a window blowing out, in a doorway blowing out. That's going to draw air from wherever you have another doorway or window open. It's going to draw air into the building, and it's going to push the air, the exhaust air out of the building. That's the simple physics of it. What you don't want to do is put a fan in the open window so it blows into, because that creates currents that then right onto people. The guidance on ceiling fans is that ceiling fans are okay provided they're running at a low speed, because what you're trying to do is move the air within the building. What you don't want to do is create a downdraft. And again, as you know from your fans, you can have them running in one of two directions. You can draw air up or you can push air down. And what you want to be doing is not pushing air onto people. So you want them running in a slow rate and circulating the air so the bad, potentially virus-laden air can get out and fresh air can get in. And we'll talk some more about this next month and offer some potential ideas in terms of how to minimize the impact of winter while maximizing ventilation. Okay, so from hands up, Andy Chisholm, I believe you're at the top of the list.
Okay, yeah, a question about a couple of our protocols that seem to be out of step with almost every other church in the area. The one is masking at podiums. We've actually lost parishioners because of that. As you've talked about our average age group, many of them have hearing issues. I actually had a new woman come in last week and left because she couldn't hear properly. In this particular case, the person with the mask didn't maybe have the booming voice that I have, and the verger was able to recommend Chalmers Church or the Lutheran Church, which both do not require that. So that seems to be out of step with pretty much any other church I know of in Kingston, and it is something that is affecting the ability of our parishioners to participate in worship. And the other thing I have is something I think that Lisa had brought up, and then maybe a couple of meetings ago, about the strange limit of 10 people on vaccinated youth that are over 13. And so our youth group, we've moved to the Lutheran Church because we're doing a lot of ministry with them, just because that just doesn't make what is the difference between a 14-year-old vaccinated youth and an 18-year-old vaccinated youth? And I know there was some talk about maybe changing that particular one, but the one I'm most concerned about is this masking at the podium.
And so, it'll be factored and considered when the next ones come through. Some echo coming somewhere. We remain conservative. We remain conservative in all matters, because again, if that person at the podium who is now projecting their voice, that is a potential source. The second thing, as the bishop states many times, is our churches don't do well in gray areas. And so at this point, we remain clear that if you're in the church, you have a mask on, and that drives clarity. It drives consistency.
So why is every other church, even other dioceses, not doing this? This just seems to be out of step, and we are literally losing parishioners because of this. And our particular lectern is 4 meters away from any people. Like this is one of the problem with this is when we have policies that don't make sense, is that the people start to roll their eyes and people kind of go, oh, the diocese, right? And I don't want that to happen. And we start to lose a little bit of credibility, I think, with as I say, this particular one has never made much sense to me. And every time Doug Ford or Justin Trudeau or anybody, Joe Biden gets up to a podium, they take off their mask, right? And that's out of respect for those that have hearing issues, and so that they can be seen and heard.
Yeah, one of the things that I've said through this is when we began the pandemic, because there was so little known about the disease and how it was spread, we had the whole issue around fomites, around aerosols, the cleansing, all of those sorts of things. I said when we all took off, we all sort of took off together, and everybody was lockstep in this thing. And the air when we took off was clear. There wasn't a lot of turbulence. I think as we're coming into the last days, and pray God it's the last days of the pandemic, there's more turbulence in this thing. You see much more things where people do roll their eyes about being at K-Rock Center or whatever it's called now, full capacity for a hockey game, and then having to do capacity limits. There's going to be all kinds of inconsistencies. One of the things that we have tried to do through this is to make sure that if we're going to make a mistake, we try to err on the side of caution. And we have been advised by the epidemiologist who advised us, speaks a lot about the dangers of forceful exhalation. And as Alec pointed out in that chart, the people that are in our demographic tend to be the ones that are the most susceptible to this. And with the increasing variants coming out, the variants of concern, that constantly weighs. And hopefully in the next days and weeks, as the numbers change and as we see what's going to be happening provincially, we'll have changes made to that. I'd prefer to err on that side. That's the concern that I have personally, and my hope is I'm sorry that people would leave because of that. I think you try to work out different options around amplification, microphones, things like that. I know at St. James you got those lovely Britney Spears type microphones, and hopefully those can can help to make a difference so that the amplification happens, so that doesn't become an issue. But yeah, you're going to see differences, and we've seen differences throughout the pandemic where in the midst of it, when we were all more lockstep, there were those churches who chose to follow a different course and for their own reasons. But you know, we have the issues that we have based on the advice that we receive, and there are going to be those differences. And I think as we get to the end of the pandemic, we're going to see those inconsistencies and those things that are not lockstep. I would caution and urge patience as we move through it. We'll get through this, but are those issues when I hear the advice that I receive around how this is spread, the danger of the variants. And thank God we've had good numbers here in Eastern Ontario, and they continue to be really good. And I think that has been part of that has been due to the seriousness, I think, with which many of the people across our region have taken this, not just within our church, but in others. But I do know that when the province, the civil province, have discussed COVID response, they point to the Anglican Church as an exemplar in how to do this, the seriousness with which we've taken it across our 7 dioceses. So we're going to have those differences. We have those differences now. Diocese of Toronto has made that decision around masking and removing masks. I think Sunday was the first day where they did, Andy, as you described. I know decisions have been taken in other dioceses around this, but I continue and I hope we get through these days. I'm looking forward to the end of it, but continue to try to urge caution as much as possible. I understand the frustrations with it. And I understand that the challenges, the eye rolling and the inconsistencies that are going to be perceived. But at the end of the day, I'd rather be too cautious than not cautious enough. And that's why we're taking a very conservative approach on that. But anyway, I understand the point.
Julie Daxon, I believe you've got.
Oh, I think there was one more, Alec, on the youth group piece. To answer, and I think we had a discussion about this, and I think when we were talking about youth groups, we were talking about, you think of youth groups, you think of people under the vaccination age. And so while a group may be referred to as a youth group, I think if they're over, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alec, I think the conversation we had around that is if they're 12 and up, the same gathering limits apply that would apply if you were in your 50s. It relates to the vaccination, but I think when we talk youth group, and those limitations, it related to the 12 and under. I think you may want to correct me on that, Alec, but I think that was that because I remember that question, and I remember saying, look, if they're over 12 and vaccinated, then the same rules would apply to any gathering limit.
Okay, so that needs to be communicated. I've been doing youth ministry since I was ordained, and youth ministry has always been teens and above. So anything 12 and under I consider to be children, but I think that does need to be communicated because we have literally moved our youth ministry out of the Anglican building so to be able to do it. So that would be helpful to have that clarified.
Thank you.
Good ecumenical effort, though. Well done. Julie.
Hello, everyone. I have 2 questions. The first one is fairly simple. The second one, maybe not so much. I just had a question about the recordings. Now that you've changed platform, how soon will these be available on the website to view?
So basically, it's usually the next day. Has been where we drive it. It has to be downloaded, and then Mark needs to take it, do a little bit with it, and then get it posted to the website. So we do generally we target to get it up the next day.
Okay, and my second question is regarding vaccinations. I understand that the church is exempt from asking for vaccinations according to the province. But that does not mean that we cannot ask for proof of vaccination. That just means that we are not required to ask. Is that correct?
That is correct. For a service of worship, right, which could be, which is referred to as a religious rite ceremony or service, then there is not a requirement for proof. However, The wardens, as I mentioned earlier, the wardens and incumbent together, because it affects worship, can choose that they wish to enforce that only vaccinated people can enter services of worship. And then basically you would then inform the bishop's office. We have 2 churches in the diocese that have so chosen. Lots of debate in different places about that. But if the wardens and incumbents so choose, you can make that decision. You must provide for medical exemption, otherwise you are violating human rights. So if someone has a valid and proven documented medical exemption, then you must accept that. But no, the wardens and incumbent can set that policy.
Okay, our church is looking at that, and we've actually set a date to implement it, but we're still reviewing. However, the exemptions, like the medical exemptions, are very tricky, and I'm trying to figure out how do we go about that. We cannot ask a parishioner to provide something medical that is private. So is the provincial government creating some sort of document or passport that is given to somebody who would be exempt?
So there is a prescribed form, if you will, or a detail of what has to be provided. So if someone, what you're essentially doing in your church is the equivalent of a restaurant, for example. And so if you go to enter a restaurant, you are by law required to have proof of vaccination or a medical exemption. Now, it does not need to be, what that says is that the doctor is stating that for a valid medical reason, they are certifying that you are exempt from vaccine. You are not able to be vaccinated. They're not saying it's because you have this condition or because of whatever. It needs to be, but it needs to be certified by, and there's a list of people that are entitled to, are able to certify, and it needs to simply state and with their name and letterhead. So there's a number of things that must be provided, but they don't need to disclose personal medical information like I have diabetes,
Yes.
or I'm undergoing chemo, but it does need to come from a doctor that says, I am exempted. This person is exempt for medical reasons, and I certify that.
So if we come across someone who says they're exempt but does not have any documentation, we would refer them back to their doctor to get a medical certificate that would allow them in?
Yeah, there are a list of them there. Doctor, a nurse practitioner, I believe, can also do it. But yep, there is a standardized way to, and that is really no different than the person would face if they went to a restaurant or any other business that's required.
And are there any other exemptions than medical?
No.
No. Okay.
There are no, for one thing, there is no religious exemption that says I for religious reasons refuse to take a vaccine. That is not a valid reason.
Okay. And so we'll notify you as soon as we have our plan in place.
Yep. And again, it's a matter of being cautious on that front, because not taking it is not a legal matter, but once you are involved in the human rights side, that can get tricky. And we have a number of cases already where people are complaining about my rights were violated by, so just need to be careful.
Yeah, so one of the things our pastor mentions that if we have to refuse somebody, we provide other options, as in we have the online service, and
Right.
we also do a once a month Eucharist drive-through.
And again, those are important pieces for someone pastorally to be aware that, that the priest is still there for them, that there is liturgy available to them, and that in fact I suspect most of our clergy would go and take someone communion if it was a pastoral emergency. So I think on those fronts, there are choices, and it's difficult, but that's a choice locally you're going to make.
Thank you.
Okay, if we're able to, we have another couple of comments in the chat. Ian Ritchie says perhaps Reverend Trish Miller could comment on their experience of radiant heating. This may help congregations feel warmer when we want to increase ventilation in the winter.
So next month, we'll allocate some time to talking about ventilation and some of these pieces. And so I will reach out to Trish and we'll look. There's a number of churches have done some things. I know St. Lawrence has done some things with air filtration and purification that I believe St. James did some things. I know a number of churches have done some things. Like to be able to share some experience and practices across.
Okay, great. So JC has also said treasurers are not per se covered by the diocese vaccination policy. Is that correct?
That is correct, because the treasurers will in general do their work in more private. The people that, if you look at the policy where the application is, it's people that are actively involved and publicly involved in worship or activities. So the clergy, lay readers and lay staff, of course our diocesan staff, but musicians, vocalists, readers, intercessors, servers, those distributing communion, greeters, ushers, sides people, and of course the wardens themselves would often act, but the treasurers were not specifically listed.
Okay, at the moment, no further questions that have not been addressed.
So we are at the top of the hour. So Bishop, if we have no further questions, can we turn back to you for closing?
Great, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for all your questions, and please don't hesitate to put your questions in. Again, as we were saying through this, things change. We have to make decisions in real time on this stuff, and especially we keep one ear to what's happening with the local health units and the province. So thank you so much for the work you're doing and for the questions today. Just as we come to a conclusion today, let us all join together and say the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great week and look forward to seeing Synod delegates and all interested people and everyone who wants to be there at Synod starting this Thursday night with the Synod service. Exciting times. See you.
Bye.